For the entire road to WrestleMania, I, Graham Jason Matthews, have been reviewing every past WrestleMania as seen in the WWE Network. In this video, my review of WrestleMania 16, aka WrestleMania 2000, officially marks past the halfway point in my WrestleMania reviews. WrestleMania 16 I was not very fond of. I thought it was one of the worst WrestleManias that I've seen, to be quite honest with you, even somewhat, in some ways, kind of worse than some of the earlier ones, which a lot of people like to poop on, but I did not think this was a good show for many reasons, and I'll get to that in just a second. But for starters, though, this was I believe, the only WrestleMania in history to not feature a standard singles matchup, with the exception of it was the matchup between Terry Reynolds and the Cat. It was a cat fight. I don't really technically count that, even though it was one-on-one. It was not a standard singles matchup. So the only WrestleMania in history to not feature a regular singles matchup, which was kind of the downfall of this show. And you can kind of summarize it and sum it up in just one word, and it being a mess from start to finish. But nevertheless, kicking off the show, a tag team match, Big Boss Man and Bull Buchanan taking on the Godfather and D'Lo Brown. The match itself was okay, but it really didn't serve much of a purpose aside from just kind of getting these guys on the show. I don't know what the Godfather and D'Lo Brown obviously had history dating back to the Nation of Domination, but the match itself was, there really wasn't anything too noteworthy about it aside from Ice-T singing the Godfather to the ring at the start of the matchup. So that was pretty cool, the live performance. It was very WrestleMania-esque. But aside from that, the match was not WrestleMania-esque. It felt like something you would see on Raw. It was nice to see the Big Boss Man get a win for once, which was pretty rare during his time in WWE, whether it be his previous stint or his later stint as a henchman for the McMahon-Helmsley regime. I think this might have been his final WrestleMania too. I don't recall him being at WrestleMania 17. So opening up the night after 1 year removed from being in a Hell in a Cell match with The Undertaker, now kicking off the show, kind of one of these prime examples of a guy that have gone from a prominent position at WrestleMania to kind of opening up the show, which has happened with a lot of people in the past. But still, decent matchup. Didn't really have anything wrong with it, but just kind of felt like a waste of time for the most part. Up next, the Hardcore Battle Royal for the Hardcore Championship. Now, this had a 15-minute time limit, and the rules weren't really well explained. They showed a backstage video with all the contestants and the referees in the matchup from earlier on in the night from Heat, explaining the rules of the contest, which I got to an extent. But for the most part, again, it was nothing short of a mess. It was a big clusterfuck with everyone just kind of hitting each other. And what I didn't understand about the matchup, because what you had to do, and what I thought it was, and a battle royal in the sense that there were 30 guys, 20 guys or something like that, all brawling at ringside. It was not your typical over-the-top rope battle royale. It was everyone, and like the Hardcore Championship, I love the 24/7 rule, but in this particular case, you can get pinned, in any case with the Hardcore Championship, you can get pinned anywhere in the arena and win that championship. But in this particular case, in this Hardcore Battle Royal, you couldn't pin just anybody, which I thought where the rules were. That was not the case here. What the case was that you had to pin the champion. So that being said, it didn't make any sense whatsoever for the people in the matchup to be brawling with other people. You would think that all the other 19 other combatants, or how many people were in the matchup, would go straight after the champion. But for the most part, it was just like 2 or 3 people after the champion, and everyone else would be brawling at ringside. So it made absolutely no sense. So I didn't really get that part of it. It was fun in short spurts. I like the Hardcore Championship, and as I've said before, I really love the 24/7 rule. And part of what made it so great and so special and so fun was Crash Holly, who did, even the finish was fucked up. You'd think that Crash Holly won, but Hardcore Holly won the championship instead. It was very confusing. The finish looked like it was botched. The match itself was nothing special. Viceroy, I think, was the longest reigning quote-unquote hardcore champion in this matchup, holding for half of it before the Mean Street Posse got involved and everything else. But just a mess of a matchup. I liked Crash Holly's involvement, but everything else was a huge clusterfuck. Up next, another tag team matchup. TNA Test and Albert with Trish Stratus in their corner. I believe this was her WrestleMania debut. Defeating Head Cheese, Al Snow, and Steve Blackman. I liked the team of Head Cheese. I thought they were very entertaining. Steve Blackman had zero personality, and Al Snow kind of gave that to him, and Steve Blackman was a badass in the ring. So they were a nice tag team for what it was, kind of like a Team Hell No kind of thing. But once again, like with the opening tag team match, I didn't really remember much about the match itself. The only thing that I remember from the matchup was Chester McCheeserton, if I pronounced that correctly. It was the mascot for Head Cheese, some guy dressed up in a massive cheese suit who came out at ringside to help them, rally them to victory, which of course did not work. They came up on the losing end of the contest, and then Al Snow and Blackman would beat them up after the matchup, even though they were the baby faces. So again, kind of a waste of a matchup, just kind of a way to get these guys on the show, and it was stupid. I mean, it was funny a little bit, but still, it just kind of felt like a waste of time. Of course, one of the highlights from the show, one of the sole highlights from WrestleMania 16, being the Triangle Ladder match for the WWF Tag Team titles, pitting the then champions, the Dudley Boys, against the Hardys, against Edge and Christian, kind of paving the way for the TLC matchup that we would come to know later that year at SummerSlam, as well as at WrestleMania 17 the following year. So this matchup, I mean, nothing that I could say would do it justice, but I thought this was an amazing matchup, and I think this was my first time watching it too. I'm pretty sure I've seen the SummerSlam matchup. I've seen the WrestleMania matchup a few times. I've never seen this one, of course, though, which is funny because I've seen all the other ones, but not the initial triangle ladder match between these three teams. But again, an amazing ladder match. All three teams have such great chemistry, and the involvement of all the people at ringside. It might not have been this one. Maybe I'm thinking of WrestleMania 17 because I watched that show right after this one. The involvement of Rhino and Lita and Spike might have been just a WrestleMania 17, but still, though, a really fun matchup. Edge and Christian coming out victorious as still the new WWF Tag Team Champions. And something that I did not know was that they won every single encounter. I don't know about the Triangle or TLC 3, TLC 4, whatever you want to call it, on that random episode of SmackDown. I don't know if they won that. I don't think they did. I think it was just Jericho and Benoit who won that bout. But Edge and Christian would win this championship matchup, the SummerSlam Triangle, or the first ever TLC matchup, and then the matchup at WrestleMania the following year as well. So they would win all three matches, which was something I did not know before watching this bout. But great matchup. If anything, go back and watch this show solely for this matchup. Fantastic stuff. The cat fight, as I mentioned before, between Terry Runnels and the Cats, with Val Venus as the special guest referee. Again, a complete train wreck of a matchup, if you can even call it that, with Mae Young in the Cats' corner, and the Fabulous Moolah in Terry Runnels' corner. I was even watching just recently WrestleMania 22, which I'll get to on Tuesday of this upcoming week. But it looks like the Fabulous Moolah and Mae Young are at every single WrestleMania. Or that's what it at least feels like. And they were great here. Not WrestleMania 22, I'm sorry, WrestleMania 23, I think. But still, they're so entertaining. There's no way you cannot love them and their respective involvement in this matchup. But them stripping down each other, and then Terry and the Cat, which I won't complain about. But the match itself, from a wrestling standpoint, was a complete throwaway matchup. Served no real purpose aside from just getting the women on the show. And it was basically what you would think it would be, and it just being a complete train wreck. Up next, a 6-person intergender tag team matchup with Too Cool tagging with Chyna to take on the Radicals, Eddie Guerrero, Perry Saturn, and Dean Malenko. So the only real story behind this matchup was that Eddie was had the hots for Chyna, and he was flirting with her, and she wouldn't go out with him. That was pretty much the basis of this matchup. I have no idea how Too Cool got involved, but basically, it would have made more sense if Rikishi just teamed with Too Cool. They were together anyway, when we would see Grandmaster Sexay and Scotty 2 Hotty later on in the night with Rikishi, so a little bit later on in the show. So I don't know why they just didn't tag team together. So that was weird. But the match itself, it was fun because Eddie Guerrero makes anything he's involved with great, much like I said with Owen Hart years ago. But he was very good here. I enjoyed his involvement. But the match itself was your standard 6-person tag team matchup. And Chyna is a freak of nature. You don't need me to tell you that. She's impressive in every single match she competes in. She was kind of a sight to see in this contest as well. But aside from that, it felt like you would see something you would see on Raw or anything like that, a standard TV match, like I said with the other tag team matches. Nothing really stood out about it as being special. It was kind of there. But still, though, the involvement of Eddie and Chyna was what made it fun and entertaining. But aside from that, you're a pretty ho-hum 6-person tag team matchup. A 2 out of 3, or not technically a 2 out of 3, it was a 2-fall triple threat match for the Intercontinental and European Championships. So now it sounds really, really confusing on paper. But again, the stipulation of it was a complete clusterfuck. Even Jericho said that in his first, I think it was his second book. Actually, it might have been his first book, I can't recall. No, it was his second book for sure. But still, though, it was a train wreck of a matchup. Very well wrestled, I'll give it that. I was talking to someone about this shortly after I watched it a few weeks ago. It was a very well wrestled matchup. You have 3 of the best wrestlers in WWE history, in Chris Benoit, Kurt Angle, and Jericho. But the match itself was really nothing to behold. I mean, the stipulation, I mean, although it was unique, I'll give it that, it was very confusing to keep track of. I mean, in a two-fall triple threat match, the first fall would be crowned, whoever won the first fall would be crowned the Intercontinental Champion, and whoever won the second fall would be crowned the European Champion. So it made sense from that respect, but I don't know, it was just hard to keep track, and still, I mean, they had a story in place there with Kurt Angle being put in the matchup by, I think he was then commissioner or something. I'm not really sure what power he had, but he made this matchup on Bob Backlund, which was cool. It was cool to see him. He was not on the show itself. I think he was on Heat, and Kurt Angle took him out with an ankle lock. But Kurt Angle was the cocky dual champion. He was talking to a security guard before the matchup, saying something about like, "Will you help me hold my championships?" or something like that. But Kurt Angle's always great, and as an entertainer, as a character, as a wrestler. So he made this matchup really enjoyable. But in the story, like I said before, was kind of Kurt Angle being the dual champion and Benoit and Jericho being the ones to take those titles from him. Benoit would win the Intercontinental Championships, or the Intercontinental Championship, and Jericho to win the European Championship. They would kind of switch the belts. So, so yeah, it was a good matchup for what it was. Very well wrestled, but the stipulation was what not killed it for me, just kind of hindered it to an extent. Another tag team matchup up next, Rikishi and Kane teaming up against D-Generation X. So what I found interesting about this matchup and why they didn't do it, I really have no idea, and I don't know why it was next. But Kane and X-Pac kind of had a long-standing, feud, but storyline in place to kind of culminate in a singles match at WrestleMania. So I don't know what really forced them to change plans, but kind of dating back to the years prior to WrestleMania, when D-Generation X was kind of on the splits, and Triple H and Chyna joined the McMahon-Helmsley faction, so that left X-Pac, Road Dogg, and Billy Gunn. I think Road Dogg would kind of break off on his own, maybe just X-Pac and Billy Gunn, or vice versa, I'm not exactly sure. But they would kind of go off on their own as their own little D-Generation X, and they would recruit Kane, kind of make him an unofficial member of D-Generation X. X-Pac would turn on Kane, and they would reform the original DX, a part of the McMahon-Helmsley faction, and Kane would go out to seek his revenge against X-Pac. So again, you would logically think it would lead to a singles match between X-Pac and Kane at WrestleMania. That was not the case, and it led to a tag team match with Rikishi and Kane against D-Generation X's X-Pac and Road Dogg instead. A throwaway matchup if I've ever seen one. It was the shortest tag team match of the night, at only 4 minutes. Rikishi's involvement was just very, very random. I mean, they danced after the matchup, and they would also take out Pete Rose, too, I think, after WrestleMania 14 and 15, and now at 16 as well, so that was pretty funny. But yeah, Pete Rose's involvement in this matchup afterwards, or I think it was afterwards, either before or after, when he got taken out by Kane. And like I said, Too Cool would come down and they would do the dance, and it was a cool sight, but no pun intended. But the match itself was complete throwaway and kind of a wasted opportunity when you could have easily done Kane and X-Pac, which would have been much more, not a marquee matchup, but it would have been much more memorable had we just gotten that in a one-on-one bout as opposed to a tag team matchup. So we get to the main event. Speaking of throwaway matches, a fatal four-way elimination match for the WWF Championship, pitting the then-champion Triple H against The Rock, Mick Foley, and The Big Show. So the whole story going into this, I mean, it's a long tail of the tape. I'm not going to go into everything, but with The Rock winning the Rumble and Big Show beating for the title shot at the following pay-per-view, I think in No Way Out in February, and then Mick Foley, who retired in No Way Out, was brought back by Linda McMahon. All this crazy bullshit, and it was pretty much a way. It was less about the matchup than it was about the McMahons. It was more about the feud, the family feud between Stephanie, Shane, Linda, and Vince. Linda really served no purpose in this whatsoever. She was in Mick Foley's corner. Mick Foley did not have a good showing here. Even he has admitted, and many people will say, that he did not look good here. He had no place being in this matchup. I mean, he can always say he main evented a WrestleMania, but at what cost? I mean, it would not be his final matchup, thank God. He would have a lot better matches down the line, specifically at WrestleMania 22, and I'll talk about that on Tuesday, like I said before, against Edge. But he looked terrible here. There was one spot which I think they might have replayed just recently. I feel like I watched it somewhere else too. But he jumped from the top rope, and he was going to do an elbow, I think to Triple H at ringside or to The Rock through the announce table, but he landed on the side of the table instead, and he hit his elbow on the side. He made no contact with the person on the table. It was very embarrassing. He looked terrible, and he got eliminated a few minutes afterwards anyway. So his involvement in this was completely unnecessary. The Big Show, the same thing. He was taken out within minutes, despite being the one to take the championship title shot from The Rock a few months earlier, so he was a complete waste of involvement in this matchup. So it should have been Triple H versus The Rock from the start. That's basically what it came down to. And I'm not going to say it was a terrible matchup and the worst main event in WrestleMania history. We've had worse, or at least up to this point we have. I mean, John Cena and The Miz comes to mind, though. That said, though, I mean, the matchup, like I said, got entertaining down the stretch with Triple H and The Rock, but that's what it should have been the entire time. The Big Show and Mick Foley should not have been in there to begin with. Just kind of dragged the matchup down. The matchup went far longer than it needed to. It went past 30 minutes. So it should have just stayed Triple H versus The Rock. And when it's those two one-on-one, that's where the magic is. They created a lot of great chemistry in this contest. But in the end, though, Mr. McMahon would ultimately turn on The Rock, rejoin forces with Stephanie for sure, and Shane was kind of teased. I don't know what the aftermath was, and Linda was long gone by that point. And then Vince would reunite with Triple H, and Triple H would come out victorious, still the WWE champion. And only one or two or three instances in WrestleMania in the last 31 years, in the last 3 decades since the inception of WrestleMania, where a heel has come out on top in the main event of a WrestleMania, or at least I think are retaining the championship, with The Miz being the other at WrestleMania 27. And technically, Stone Cold Steve Austin ended the show as a heel at WrestleMania 17. But he won the championship. He didn't retain the title. So Triple H and The Miz are the only heels in the business to retain their titles, their respective WWE titles, in the main event of WrestleMania since its inception. But the match itself, complete throwaway until it came down to Triple H and The Rock. I don't know how they explained their way out of McMahon and Stephanie getting back together after all the bad blood that they had going for months on end. But then The Rock would lay him out afterwards. He would get the final word, and he would close the show, and sending the crowd home happy. So ending a very, very lackluster show. I mean, they really kind of built it up to be something huge and something special, with it being WrestleMania 2000, the first WrestleMania of the new century, of the new millennium. But it was anything but. It was hardly special. There was really no match aside from the Triangle Ladder match, which was the saving grace of the show that really stood out in my mind. And like I said before, the constant gimmick matches, the hardcore battle royal, the cat fight, the triple threat, the two-fall triple threat, the fatal four-ways. It was way too much. We needed a lot more singles matches on the show than what we got, because a majority of what we got was basically throwaway. So I would not recommend that you go out of your way to watch this WrestleMania. Complete waste of time. And I think the first WrestleMania to supersede 3 hours, I think, aside from maybe WrestleMania 4. It was around the time that this WrestleMania kind of went to 4 hours instead of the typical 3. But I wouldn't waste 3 to 4 hours watching the show. Kind of a complete waste of time. None of it was really that good. But like I said before, the only match worth watching from the show was the Triangle Ladder match between Edge and Christian, the Dudley Boys, and the Hardy Boys for the tag team titles. Kind of paving the way, like I said before, to the future TLC matches between the 3 teams at SummerSlam and WrestleMania 17, respectively. So that's going to do it for my review of WrestleMania 16. In the meantime, in between time, you guys can catch me on Facebook at Graham G. Matthews, on Twitter at WrestleRant. Make sure to subscribe, like, comment, and share this video. All support is greatly appreciated. And I will not be back tomorrow with my review of WrestleMania 17. Like I've said before, my reviews of 17, 19, 20, 21 are already up here on the channel. Just go to my channel, type in WrestleMania 17 review, and you'll be directed right to the link to the video that I put up last year right here in the WrestleRant video series with my review of that show. So rather, tomorrow's show, or tomorrow's edition of WrestleRant, will be covering WrestleMania 18 as seen in the WWE Network, and Tuesday we'll cover WrestleMania 22. Why I missed out on WrestleMania 18 last year, I'm not really sure. I think I was taking suggestions and people directing me towards 19 over 18, but it was still a good show, and I'll talk about that tomorrow. So have a great day, folks, and I'll catch you guys then.